I didn't show you before, in honor of Phil, that we have an original Emancipation Proclamation that was done in Brooklyn. Oh, quite a number of these were produced during Lincoln's lifetime, and this is one of them. And there are many times the entire proclamation and also designs around them. And every once in a while they come up. They're not very common. So I'm glad to be able to show you this one from Brooklyn. Now, some of the documents I was going to show you as far as Lincoln legals are concerned, here are two. One of them is just a praecipe that's signed Lincoln and Herndon for $1,500 in a sumpset, which is quite a bit. This is right up here. And this was cut off a larger document, actually. This one on the bottom is one in which a very scarce type of document where he signs A. Lincoln at the bottom. But it's a federal document where he's securing himself for the cost of the cause of the case. And I know that it's still done today, but here is a document of Lincoln doing this, and it's not an easy one to find. This is one of the most well-known cases, and it's in your book, Brian. Mm-hmm. This is called the Chicken Bone case, which was an early malpractice suit. This is all in Lincoln's hand, signs it twice, and John Stewart, his first law partner, even though this is now in the 50s, 56, in McLean County, still he was part of this, and he signs it as well. As I say, it's a malpractice suit in which Lincoln took up the case of the two physicians who had been sued because of malpractice, and he came in with some old chicken bones. And in front of everyone, he cracked them in two, and he said, "This is what your bones are like. You were lucky to have that leg still there, even though you have a limp, but your bones are as old as these chicken bones, and look how brittle they are." So they settled out of court. It's one of the best-known cases of the chicken bone case, and it's in your book as well, mentioned. Here's an interesting one. Many times, or sometimes I should say, on circuit, the judge could not make it. Maybe David Davis had the flu and couldn't be there or whatever. So one of the two lawyers on any particular case would pick a third amongst those who are on the circuit with them and have that lawyer be the judge. And here is Lincoln acting as a judge. He's not signing it, but that's in his hand. This is clipped out of a docket book that would have been for the judges. And last, I'm going to show you an interesting piece where he's acting as a commissioner for interrogatories for the state of Illinois, for the Supreme Court of the state of Illinois. He has to sign his name, Abraham Lincoln, in full, just like he did as president for any official document, like a military commission. He signed his name 25,000 times just on that particular document alone. But here is a lawyer full Abraham Lincoln is a little more unusual, and this is a nice little piece to be able to see. In Hildene, Robert Lincoln's home. It's just awesome. Yeah. So, by the way, is his gravesite in Arlington, in Washington. He has the most wonderful place for eternity that I've ever seen. It's not far from Kennedy's grave, and there's a little outcropping and a big sarcophagus where he and his wife Mary lie, and under a grove of trees, so they're cool in the summer, and it overlooks all of Washington down there. It's really terrific. When did Lincoln first read Blackstone?
I believe we don't have real solid documentation of this. We have a lot of his neighbors saying that during, I believe in the winter of 1831 and 32, they saw him reading law books propped up on stumps and on rocks and in the areas around New Salem. They never actually say it's Blackstone, but it probably was. That would have been the first book that he would have read, and that was sort of the seminal, what Daniel Borston called the do-it-yourself guide to becoming an American lawyer.
Yeah,
so he would have been reading that, probably the very first thing. So
same year as William Lloyd Garrison prints his essay in the Liberator about not respecting law at all, that it doesn't provide slavery freedom for the slaves.
I never thought of that.
It's an interesting counterbalance.
That is.
What were the differences, do you think, between the cases that he did on circuit and those in Springfield? Was there much of a difference there?
I don't know. It's really hard to say. I concluded about 40% of his cases, most of the time, came from his circuit practice. I don't know that there's a different type of case that he practiced either one of them. Actually, they were all pretty much the same sort of thing. I think he had to make do with less in the way of precedent on the circuit because he could carry a few books around with him, of course. So,
here's an email question that came in for you, Philip. It has been said that the Emancipation Proclamation did not free a single slave. How does this reflect on Lincoln's attitude toward blacks?
The Emancipation Proclamation, when it was, on the day it was issued, January 1st, didn't free a single slave. The Declaration of Independence that was signed on the 4th of July in 1776 didn't make anybody independent. But both documents changed the nature of what the struggle was going to be. It turned the Army of the Union into an army of liberation. And if you consider all the areas affected by the Emancipation Proclamation, about 2.5 million slaves were going to be free as soon as they got protection from the Union Army. What the hesitation of Lincoln in freeing all of the slaves with that one document reflects basically his constitutional understanding and his belief that he could not touch the slaves who were not subject to military authority under the Constitution. So it's a constitutional decision, but one which has an astounding impact, and it provides freedom for approximately 75% of the 4 million men, women, and children who were slaves.
Actually, another question was asked too from the email. Does Lincoln's colonization plan expose him as a racist?
Lincoln's colonization plan is many things. For one thing, it's a way to trump the accusations by the Democratic Party at that time that blacks were going to come forth as soon as they were freed and marry up with all the white women around and take everybody's job. And some of the language was extraordinarily virulent. Stephen Douglas, at the same election where he's debating with Abraham Lincoln, he's giving other speeches, and those other speeches are much more strong and hostile to black people. And in the debates with Lincoln, he calls black people alligators. I think you can say that, that they used the colonization idea and asked and thought that blacks might want to leave. Lincoln never coerced anybody into leaving. He said that there should be a place for them if they wanted to go there. Did he understand that there was a vast gulf between white people and black people in that society? Absolutely. Did that mean that he thought blacks were inferior? Only in certain kinds of ways, and he was changing his mind all the time as blacks showed their capacity for being soldiers. That changed his mind.
He was able to grow. I mean, he always, look at the 50s, how he grew just in the 1850s. I think as president, he also grew in that regard.
And I think he also thought it would be a good idea if some blacks could go and repeat the American frontier experience someplace else, because that had always been described as some sort of character building thing. A man goes out and plows his farm and builds his character as he builds his fortune. What if blacks could do that? And Lincoln says, if you do this, you will give a start to white people, who will then, I presume he means that then will respect you the more, but offer you an opportunity. Where in this society, Lincoln's understanding of the power of anti-black sentiment was right on. Not very many white people liked black people at all.
Well, even throughout the world, I mean, racism from outside one's own grouping is always a difficult thing. And other cultures have it within themselves as well as we do. Of course, black and white is very stark.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we have that. Yes?
Mr. Weinberg, I have a question, but I don't want to get in front of this gentleman that had a question before.
Oh, yeah.
Arthur, please.
What impact do you think his legal career had on his personal life, if any?
That's an interesting question. There have been people who really like Lincoln who point out a case involving a man named Nance where Lincoln used an argument based on the Northwest Ordinance to argue for the freedom of some African American fugitives. And they say, look how Lincoln is foreshadowing the great emancipator. There are people who don't like Lincoln who look at a case called the Matson case and say, because the Matson case, Lincoln defended the property rights of a slaveholder and says, see, here's a bigot. And it just depends on what your agenda is. If you look at the whole thing, however, out of all the cases he litigated in his career for 25 years, I believe it was only about 16 that involved African Americans. So it's a very...
34.
34, I'm sorry, 34, yeah. 34 cases involving African Americans that ran the gamut. A little bit of everything. I argue in the book that you really don't want to try and find hints of the great emancipator in here because I just don't see it. I think he makes decisions about which cases he takes and doesn't take based upon his professional ethics, not so much on his personal feelings about race. And I really think that's the best way to approach this, because otherwise you end up making an argument based on what your own predilections are. You know, he did do pro bono work for a barber in Springfield named Billy Florville, Billy the Barber, so he showed some heart there towards an African American. On the other hand, he did argue for a slave owner's rights in the Matson case. He did also, on the other hand, defend the rights of several men accused of harboring fugitive slaves. You can go back and forth on this, and I don't think his racial attitudes, I think he set them to one side, whatever they were, and did the job. And I think that's what you find there.
I think if you look at Lincoln as a lawyer and as a devotee of the legal constitutional system, the thing that Lincoln dislikes most about slavery is its effect on the political constitutional system of democracy and equality. And if you look through Lincoln's comments on slavery, he almost never, I mean, I found 7 times in his entire writing, when he talks about slavery, he almost never says slavery is bad because it hurts black people. He does talk hundreds of times about slavery and its impact on our democracy, its impact on self-government, its impact on equality. And those are the things that really make him angry. So I think as a devotee of the system, starting off with his Lyceum address, you see that strong devotion, and slavery is attacking that and throwing off, destroying the possibility that the country can realize its ideals of equality. And if the Union is saved, slavery will be gone. And he's always been in a position where he wanted to save what was the foundation of that Union, I think, the Constitution and the rule of law. So I would say maybe that's another angle on his attitudes toward race, and especially toward slavery.